you say, David?
We very well may. I would say with boys, going back to even the story I just told, think about the version of that on a toddler, on an elementary age boy. I always think it's safe to start. We may not end there, but to start at a place of assuming that lack of awareness is playing some role. Like he's not aware that he's standing too close. He's not aware that he's hugging too tight. He's not aware that when he's frustrated, the teeth come out in those moments. That's not saying we're going to let him off the hook with that, but we are going to start from a place of assuming he needs some practice. And we talk all throughout that book about how practice makes progress. It doesn't make perfection, it makes progress. And generally speaking, boys just need a lot more practice in that space. And so I don't think it benefits any boy for us to go straight to a place of assuming his intention is to be mean, or he's a lifelong biter, or, you know, he's the rough kid. He's the, however we want to finish that sentence, but assuming he needs some practice, he doesn't have enough awareness. I think that's the starting point. And then I talk in the awareness chapter about the whole concept with boys of game day footage, like how often coaches have players come back on a Saturday and watch footage of the Friday night game. And, you know, think about that for a minute. Why does it benefit anyone to rewatch a game you've already played? You can't change the outcome, can't make it any different, but we can, back to Sissy's point, develop some perspective. And we get to see things from a different angle. When I'm watching where the, you know, play was shot, I'm going to see something that I could not see on the field right there in the middle of it. And I believe in that practice with boys socially. Like, I think it's great not to do it when they're not aware, but to ahead of time say, you know, that whole thing that coaches do a lot, I want us to do some of that to help you build some awareness. Like, I've had countless coaches recommended that to players of the year. Like, let's watch it together. Let's see what we can learn. Let's try and pick up some things we may not, even I may not have seen watching the game so closely. And I think that's beneficial. And, you know, at a birthday party, you're just going to look like you're snapping photos of what's going on, but you could be videoing some interactions that you could later go back and watch with them. Like, hey, buddy, look right here. Did you see that your friend was stepping a little bit away from you? I think you were standing too close. You know, I think you were maybe shouting right there at that moment. Like, watching for that. You could flip on just the audio version when you're carpooling a group of guys in the car, and then re-listen to a little of that footage at some point later for his growth and benefit, not for the sake of judging and shaming, obviously, but, you know, like, let's listen together and see what we can see. Now, I will say, last thought there, I don't believe it's so helpful with boys, and this is not just true of this category, but a lot of categories, to say, do you think that's a good idea? Because I think most of them will say no. I have parents all the time say to their adolescent boys, don't you think it'd be a good idea to go to counseling? To which 99.9% of them say, no, I do not. Like, you're welcome to go. I'm glad it helps you, Mom, but no. So I think there are a lot of things where it's like, don't ask, do you think that would help? Just say, yeah, I think it would help. I think there's a reason coaches do that.
Yeah.
Sissy, what would you say about girls?
That's really good.
Well, I think girls lean kind of two different ways when we see them being unkind to others. And one are the girls who maybe value competition over connection, and they are looking for a little bit more power. They are kind of quintessential mean girls. I mean, they're the most powerful girl in the group. And with those kids, I think you can see it start early. And so with them, I mean, a few things I would think about, they're valuing power over empathy in those times. And so putting them in some places early on where they're having to build more empathy. I mean, even Common Sense Media has great games to help kids develop empathy. I would say those kids need to be serving somewhere in the community. They need to be in places that they're not going to succeed. They need to have to practice being average. I mean, all of those things I think are good for that girl to help her develop more awareness, more empathy, all of those things, more vulnerability, because she's trying hard not to have that. I remember a high school girl saying to me, who was that classic girl, saying to me, the closer I get to Jesus, the less well I treat other people. Like, that doesn't even make sense. Like, I don't even know what you're talking about. But
that sounds like something they say in Nashville. I don't know. Nashville maybe Dallas too. Yeah. I want to ask you, how do you coach well in those little years?
David, you want to jump in first?
Yeah, but I'm gonna preface it by saying I don't think a lot of moms listening are going to love my answer to this, but stay with me. Okay. Just stay with me. Go back to what I said a little bit earlier. I think it's almost always more clumsy than clean. So one of my, we'll start a good place. One of my favorite things about boys is, generally speaking, their ability to navigate conflict in relationship and bounce back from conflict is extraordinary. Like when Sissy was talking about the layers of communication with girls, I love that about boys. There's really just one layer. You know, it's like that. It's like that classic marriage example, you know, where a husband's like, wait, you said you didn't want a gift for your anniversary. And she's like, well, of course I did. You know, it's like, well, if you did, just say you did, you know,
just
like
tell them.
Yes,
tell them. That's what I've learned. Just tell them.
There's just one layer. And so I think boys, out of that clumsiness, can get really mad at friends. And you all, I think even toddler age boys, I talk a lot about how they have a lot of physicality to their emotion. When they're frustrated, sometimes they growl at their friends. I have parents of preschoolers tell me that all, like, he's like, argh!
It's like Roy Kent all over.
Yes. And
Roy
then
Kent's just a toddler.
exactly, it is like Roy Kent.
Yeah.
And then guess what? It's over and he's done. And he might come back to school the next day and hug the guy he growled at the day before. And I love that about boys. And so I don't know a lot of adult women who growl at people they're frustrated with, and that's okay. You don't need to, but know that if he does, it doesn't necessarily mean something's wrong or off. And they may bounce back to a pretty extraordinary friendship the next day. So I think we do a lot of that policing you just described in ways that I don't think boys can execute that so successfully. And I think we don't, understandably, moms hear me say this, we don't feel satisfied or at ease with the way boys wrestle each other down, with the way they growl at each other, with how they're too physical, with how they yell like, stop. And then the other boy's like, okay, you know, like that's the way they execute a lot of those things. It's just more clumsy. And so certainly there's a place for intervening. Don't hear me saying that. And you've heard me say extensively, coaching is useful, but I think the way it looks is just going to, it's not going to always execute the way we would hope or be as clean as we would imagine.
And for the mom of the daughter that your son is playing with, give her some grace, because the boys are clumsy. They're going to be mean maybe to you, and your daughter might cry, and it's going to be okay. And don't stop being friends with her. Because like if we, the moms of girls, if you could just hear that, and this child is going to act differently than you grew up being, or that you would ever consider being. And it's not that the mom parented wrong, and you can still hang out with her. It's just, I just need you to know that.
Boys.
Okay, that's all I got.
Yes.
All right. I only know boys.
100% agree. So I think with little girls, probably like so many things with girls, I want to figure out what's going on underneath the behavior, because I do think little girls lean towards making good friends. I mean, I think they just automatically know how to be kind a lot of times and are going to lean towards empathy with other kids. And so when they're not stepping out in relationship and in friendship, I think often there's something more to it. And typically this day and time, I would say it's anxiety or just worries. I don't mean we're diagnosing them with anxiety, but I think for those girls, though, it's not helpful to step in and do exactly what you said. Now, I want you to go talk to this person. I want you to say that, and let's practice what you're going to do here. Instead, I mean, I think even to reinforce behavior, you did so great when you spoke to Mrs. So-and-so when we were at the grocery store, or I heard you did awesome at school. And so let's go celebrate that you made a new friend at school today, that we're almost even incentivizing them reaching out past that anxiety. Because the thing is, kids who are anxious, well, all kids long to be independent, and kids who are anxious really need to be independent. And so the more we're hovering and telling them exactly what to do, we're stripping them of that. And so to help kind of on the back end with reinforcing and incentivizing, I think can be really helpful for little girls.